Hi everybody, I'm Mayor Emily Gabel-Luddy, and today on the Mayor's Show, we're going to walk through our Burbank Recycling Center. We're going to look at the kinds of things that you should be recycling, what you shouldn't be recycling, and what you definitely need to keep out. We're also going to meet Master Recycler Craig Hemphill, and he's going to walk us through the entire operation. Welcome to the Mayor's Show. So good to see you this afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor, for coming to the Burbank Recycle Center.
Well, thank you for being part of this. I know that you're going to show us a lot of things like the 3 R's about recycling, which are?
Reduce, which is the most important thing of all, then reusing things, so we're always looking for durability in products and repairability. And third and final is recycling, because what we're doing is we're taking those materials and just grinding them up into pieces and then trying to make something from them again. Okay, so that hierarchy is really important. Reduce first, reuse, then recycle.
Okay, well, as we get started, I wanted to ask you, because you've been doing recycling for years, I know, and before we get into the basics of what I brought today, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about the tree that's behind us, because I understand this is a pretty important tree.
Yeah, well, this tree is actually 20 years old now, and the tree was done in 1997. Local artist Ted Baumgart came up with this concept for the recycling tree of life. We like to call it the Junkaranda. And it's made from all scrap materials and things that were commonly recycled in the 90s. And if you look at this now, you can see that materials have shifted a little bit. But the tree itself, it has about 1,000 leaves up here. They are made of aluminum cans. So they were all cut and embossed and fastened to little cables and then onto the branches. And the skin or the bark of the tree is actually made from old blue jeans. So we called this recycled mache, and it's a combination of paper underneath, and then that was covered with denim. To the left over there, we have some glass.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute, because this looks like something we haven't seen for a really long time. What is this?
Right. Well, for those of us who have just come into the world in the last 10 years, this is a phone book. And before we had all the listings online, this is how people found their neighbors' numbers and all the business numbers locally, and everyone advertised in the phone books. And we used to end up with train car loads of these every year when they were swapped out. And there were so many different companies publishing phone books that we just had tsunami of phone books. Now those have disappeared. So instead of phone books, the other thing that has really kind of disappeared from our paper stream is newspapers. That's how we all used to get news. But now news is being broadcast over many different medias, and so people aren't reading as many newspapers, and so we've shrunk the collections tremendously for newspaper, and we no longer collect that as a separate category of paper.
While we're looking at this, can you tell us a little bit about how the recycling business has changed over the years? You were saying earlier that certain things we had a lot of, now we don't have so much.
Right.
But I wondered if there are new products that have come online that are presenting us with new challenges, and also where does this recycled material go to?
Yeah, so absolutely. What we see here in the tree is a case of tin cans. And that used to be one of the primary ways of getting, prepared food to households, just in simple cans. They've been around for 100-something years. But that has shifted, and what we're finding now is instead of a can of soup, you might buy a carton of soup. If you buy coffee, for instance, we've got some coffee cans there. They've gone from steel and tin cans to different combinations of materials, and I can show you that in just a minute.
Wow. And then what about, you mentioned that recycling doesn't take place locally necessarily anymore, that there are things that are exported, which, again, I knew nothing about. Why don't you tell our viewers something about that?
Yeah, it's actually quite amazing. Here at the Recycle Center, we actually don't recycle anything. We separate materials, and we prepare them for shipping. And those markets that they are shipped to are all over the world. Over the last 20, 25 years, it's primarily been China. Some of the paper stays here in the United States, some of the aluminum stays here, some of the plastics stay here, but primarily most of this has been shipped to China. And it's been one of the largest exports out of the United States are scrap materials. So right now, the last year, we have had some real challenges because China has demanded higher standards of purity in the materials that we ship overseas. That means higher costs for separating smaller and smaller details from the mix and keeping a more pure mix in those bales that we send out. And it has actually resulted in a closure of their markets just in this past year. So more and more we're looking for markets and looking for new opportunities, and I hope what happens over the next few years is that we're able to establish new manufacturers in the United States who can absorb a lot of this material and make it into new goods.
Do you think about how other countries in the world are getting more and more, I guess, wealth in their countries, so there's more material that's being consumed? When you think about that, are there any countries that have actually reduced, as a country as a whole, the kind of material that they're taking in?
Yeah, there are a lot of campaigns around the world to, first of all, categorize things in more categories. When the consumer is done, Japan, I think, for instance, has almost 70 categories that they separate into in some cities. In Europe, it's common that there are about 12 categories that things get separated into. In the beginnings of the Burbank program, we separated, glass, metals, all the cans and containers, the liquid containers. Those were separated into different categories to be collected at the curb. We also separated glass and paper. When we went to automated programs, everything got thrown together, and it caused a new set of problems because now we have contamination that's really high, and we're fighting to get that contamination low. If you go back to the last 5 or 6, 7 years, we were doing quite well with about 7% of everything that came into the recycle center was non-recyclable. And we work with public education all the time, trying to educate people about what can and cannot be recycled. But what's happened just in the last year, and this isn't just in Burbank, but it's in a number of jurisdictions around California, is those contamination rates have been rising. Part of it is because it's become more complicated to understand the materials that you have in hand. And the other part of this is that China is demanding a higher purity standard for the things that we are sending offshore. So we have these combinations of challenges. The other one is that markets and the commodity value of these things that we're shipping out, the scrap value has plummeted over the last year. So all these things have come together, and I think what it's going to do is kind of reset our focus to reducing waste, putting more pressure on manufacturers to create packaging and materials that are recyclable, and they're designed for recyclability, and then, doing a little better job, too, in terms of sorting and collecting in different ways.
Well, you've given us the global perspective. Yeah. Why don't we go to the table and take a look at the Burbank perspective?
Perfect. Okay.
Craig, you were mentioning the coffee cans, so I want to find out from you, what is the story about recycling coffee cans?
Well, this is kind of the perfect example of the evolution of food container. And you'll see this in a lot of different places, not just coffee, but in, other things as well. And so this is, kind of the traditional coffee can that we're all familiar with. It's tin and steel. The tin is a coating on the steel to keep it from rusting, and tin is actually quite valuable. We can put this through our sorting line, and magnets grab it from the line. We never have to touch it with a human hand. And so it makes it really simple for us. It cuts down labor and cost and everything else. So then we have, kind of this evolution where we start to get things that look more like this. And I think you brought one in too from your own home. But this is a coffee can, but it's a composite And what this is, if you look inside, you'll see kind of a shiny foil interior. The edges are tin and steel, just like the tin can. But also on the bottom, it has a tin and steel bottom. But then, if you look at all the materials, if I could grab that, what we've done is
this looks like a bracelet of some kind.
We've pulled the materials apart to kind of show what actually goes into this. And when you get this can in the store, it has a plastic top, then it has a peel top. This peel seal is made from foil and plastics. And so this is laminated, just like you would put a piece of paper through a laminating machine. This is non-recyclable. The ends are the same thing as a tin can, but because they're connected to these layers of paper and also this foil laminated paper on the inside, if we give this to a steel or tin recycler, they just go, no thanks. If we try to give it to a plastics recycler, they say, no thank you, it's too contaminated. If we give it to a paper recycler, they say, it's just too complicated. We have to screen all this other stuff out. So we don't have we don't have good facilities for composites that can actually pull these apart and do a good job of recycling. There are some, and there are a lot of claims by the manufacturer about how recyclable this stuff is. But it gets into a lot of details that, how much do you have? How much do you collect? How often can you ship it? All those things come into play. And how many categories do we actually have room and warehousing space to take care of this kind of stuff?
Somewhere in here, I brought my Trader Joe's
there you go.
can, and you're telling me that I could only really recycle the rim and the bottom.
Well, yeah. I mean, if these things were in separate categories, we could recycle any one of them. But because they're all laminated together, there you go.
We don't have any way of separating them so that they can go out to their different locations.
The most likely is that this would go to a paper pulper. They would cook it for a while, meaning they would, soak it. It would start to delaminate, but then they have to screen and, pull things out by magnets to separate all these materials. And so it's a lot of steps for the small amount of return, and that's where you get into the economics of recycling. If it's too complicated, if it's too costly, if it's, if it's just too difficult to do, there isn't a business out there that's willing to do it. And that's where we're stuck. So we need attention from the manufacturers and from the food producers, retailers, everyone, to look at the packaging and really do a good job of simplifying it and making it recyclable in the end.
A lot of coffee comes in bags, so can you tell us about the bag?
I will absolutely tell you about the bag. This is, a nice example of the product being very carefully grown. We have fair trade, organic. The company donates to good causes to do environmental restoration and everything. So they get an A++ for their efforts in creating the product. Unfortunately, they get an F- in the package because it is non-recyclable. It is a combination, again, of laminated materials. We've got foil and plastic, and oftentimes these are, laminated with, that foil is laminated a couple of times, sometimes so that you can print on a surface. They've also got stick-on labels. You got a twisty here holding the thing shut so you can reclose it. If we try to give this to paper or a plastic recycler, they don't want it. If we give it to the aluminum recycler, they don't want it. So we're stuck in this no man's land of complicated materials that just can't easily be separated.
So this actually says Friends of the Earth.
Yeah.
And I want our viewers to know and be sensitive to the fact that the packaging means as much as the product that's inside. And it would be good to go back to this manufacturer and ask them to please change their packaging. Is there any packaging that you think is more recyclable than other packaging, especially when we look at coffee?
Well, whenever you simplify the packaging to one material, you've almost got it done. And there are some markets right now that are giving us tremendous problems because we just don't have markets for certain materials. But anytime you can simplify the package and make it, a metal, or you make it a plastic, or you make it glass or aluminum, anytime you simplify it to one material, we can oftentimes get that recycled. So that's the big golden rule. Don't complicate the packages, and you can get them recycled.
So how about this one? Where does it go?
So this is a great example of something that can be recycled. This is PET. It's #1 plastic. For those people that really want to impress their neighbors, you can call it polyethyl terephthalate. And this is a
polyethyl
terephthalate. Yes.
Phthalate.
Phthalate. Yes. So this bottle can be made into a lot of different things. The carpet that we're standing on now is made from this. Yeah. And because we have a California redemption value on this, when you buy this bottle, you pay a deposit. This is a 10-cent container here. When you buy this, that money goes into a state fund, then recyclers make claims to the state fund to help pay for the recycling. So whenever we have a deposit on a bottle or a beverage container, it really helps us because it helps drive the programs and helps pay for the recycling of it.
Okay, so I get at least a B for this.
Yeah, I mean, this is good. I mean, we'd like everybody to, carry a water bottle, of course, and refill it. But if you're going to, buy a container for liquids, this is very simple. There is a question that always comes up. Should you take off the cap or leave it on?
Yes.
There are two different types of plastics. This is polypropylene. When they recycle these things, what they do is they chip and grind them first. Some plastics are denser, some of them are less dense, and so some float and some sink. And what they do is they put it into solution, and they can separate some plastics that way, just by floating and sinking the different resins. So this is one of those cases where polypropylene, I believe that floats, and I believe the PET sinks. And that's the way they separate those two. So by leaving the cap on, it goes through our system, it stays together, it's not a loose thing that runs away or gets washed away, and we're getting the two plastics recycled. So that's a good thing.
Now, as a buyer of this, can you show me where it would give me an idea and give our viewers an idea that it is truly recyclable?
Yeah. Well, okay, if you look for the triangle and the number, the only thing that signifies is the type of plastic. It is absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that it can be recycled. So a lot of people say, oh, it has the triangles and the number on it, so it's recyclable, right? Not necessarily, because we're going into this backstory again of the economics of these materials and what can and cannot be recycled. It's not just a simple signifying, mark on the container. So the other part here is California has a symbol on the bottle itself, and it says CACRV. That stands for California Redemption Value, and that means it is in our state program. It is recognized as a deposit container, but for the most part, PET, #1, very recyclable, so put that in your recycling bin.
From one of our retail shops?
Yep. Same thing. This is another water bottle, and it says on it, California cash refund 10 cents. So anything over 24 ounces or more is 10 cents. Anything under 24 ounces is 5 cents. And some manufacturers like to have 23.7 ounces so that their deposit is less. So this is recyclable. Same combination of materials. We've got PET, #1, and we've got polypropylene cap. Okay?
Okay, this one says, let me see, I think I'm learning now. CACRV, which is, and it also says, looks like CTHIME, 5 or 10 cents. Those, I think, are other states.
Other states, yeah. So a lot of distributors will sell, beverages in multiple states, and so every state that they sell into needs to have that signification for redemption for the deposits or return. And so anything in California, now if you bring bottles in from other states and they don't have the California redemption value, we will not redeem them. That's a very strict rule.
So if we're being really good on our vacation and we're buying goods or material that says it's recyclable, but hasn't got that magic CA on it.
Right.
When we come home from our vacation with all these extra plastic bottles, we should hang our heads in shame.
No. We can still recycle them.
Okay.
You just can't cash them in.
Oh.
Okay. So you can't claim the state funds that everyone has paid into here. It's jurisdictional. So if you've paid into it, you have the right to be, paid back. But if you go to other states and buy things and you haven't paid into the California system, then you have no right to come back and claim that deposit.
So it's better for our recycling center to get bottles that are coming from California.
And we do check when people come in. We always do a check of the bottles. We have to make sure that we can see those labels and those certified deposits.
Okay, let's see what else is in my magic bag. This is a takeout container from Dino's Pizzeria.
Okay, all right, good.
And I wondered if that can be recycled, and if it can't, what on earth is its fate?
Yeah, okay. So we do not have a program for food, takeout packaging at this point. There's a lot of really small details in food packaging that makes it very difficult to understand whether or not this can be recycled, composted, or handled in some other way. It has to do, paper is all recyclable. However, it depends entirely on the coating of the paper, whether it can be composted or whether it has to go to the landfill.
So coating is how this is sealed.
Yeah. Without a coating, if you had a paper box like this and you put a wet, salad in it or something wet, something with salad dressing, within just a couple of minutes, it's going to be oozing through.
Soggy and no fun.
Paper is not waterproof by any means. So there has to be a coating put on it. And there are a number of different kinds of coatings. One is what we've been doing for years, and it's basically like laminating a plastic bag to the paper. And generally that's low density polyethylene, just like any other plastic bag or putting a piece of paper through the laminator. And so that holds moisture back, and you can, take your food home or a picnic or whatever it is, and it'll last for, hours, maybe even days in the refrigerator and not bleed through. The thing that we've been trying to do over the last 20 years or so is come up with coatings that are starch-based. And so it's more like almost like putting a Jell-O on your paper, and it looks shiny, and it kind of feels like it's it's doing the job, and oftentimes it will for a short period of time. But when we put that into a composting program and bring up the heat and the microbes and moisture and everything, it does break down, and those coatings will break down, and we can turn that back into soil amendments. So it entirely depends on the coating of that paper, and that is a difficult thing to determine. At the end of a big event like the Starlight Bowl, we don't know which paper plates have been plastic laminated, which ones, we can tell which ones haven't, but we don't have the time to sit there and sort through thousands of paper plates to determine which ones are coated with, a petroleum-based plastic, starch-based, or, something else. So this is a tough one, right?
This is a question mark, then.
This is a question mark, and it almost has to be handled from restaurant to hauler to composter. In other words, if we do this as individuals and we throw it in blue bins, we're not going to get it recycled. This is going to go to trash. If we do it through our restaurants, and they can guarantee to their haulers and to their composters that they're using 100% compostables, we can kind of solve it through the composting stream. If they mix materials, however, in the restaurant, if they have, say, plastic forks and spoons and knives, if they have plastic cups, and then they use compostable boxes like this, the customers are going to mix it all up as they run out the door, and you just have a mess again. So, unfortunately, the takeout food thing is a huge challenge, and we are we're trying to replace disposables for disposables, and what we're doing is we're leaving one disposable problem, but we're entering another one. And so this is not an easy solution.
So Craig, I got this from the farmer's market.
Okay, yeah.
What is this, and can that be recycled?
So this is kind of a good example of using a lot of scrap paper in sort of a low-grade material. This is, the good thing about this little berry box is that there's no coating on it. And it's just a kind of a rough, molded, kind of bottom of the barrel, cheap paper fiber. They make it thick because this is, not very strong fiber. And if you just let this sit in, a little bit of water for a few minutes and then tossed it in your compost, it would disappear. So if you have a home composter, perfect. If it's clean and it doesn't have, major stains, I mean, a couple little colorings is no problem. But we can actually throw this in the paper mix. This is a kind of an easy solution for us. It can be either recycled or composted.
I love it. Let's put it in the recycle bin.
Yeah.
And this, I guess, you brought a...
Yeah, that one, I'm afraid we're going to have to...
Let's create a trash bin.
We're going to create the no list here up on the table, and we're going to put the big coffee can in the recycling. We're going to take these combined coffee cans, we're going to put those in the trash, along with this wonderful coffee mix and our, what we don't know, what we can't identify, paper that's laminated.
But this says Eco Box on the bottom, so
says,
I'm thinking, I'm feeling proud of myself again.
Well, it has a nice name. Whether it lives up to that name or not, I don't know. So we'd have to look it up and really, talk with the manufacturer and see if we can find some specs for it online. There are certifications for compostable papers and takeout containers. So more and more, I think we're going to be, looking at that and using those certifications to make sure that things can be composted.
We did, as you know, we had some young women come to the Burbank City Council and talk about getting rid of polystyrene clamshells and moving to compostable takeout containers. Right. So the council said they were interested in moving ahead with that. Maybe you can just give our viewers a little update on where you see that going.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of years ago, it would have been easier for us to recommend plastic replacements. But unfortunately, because of the way that the markets have shifted in the last year and a half, we're having a harder time, recommending any sort of plastics in takeout. So compostables are going to be our target over the next few years, and trying to shift to compostable materials and beef up the composting programs. And it's, the reasoning for this is very sound in that worldwide we're generating about 300 million tons of plastic every year. And only about 2/3 of that can be accounted for every year. I mean, we're losing about 1/3 of the plastics to the wilds. Not all of it ends up in the oceans, but it's along the streets and it's in the woods and fence lines and everywhere else. And you've seen it in the LA River, and all of our waterways are very impacted by plastics, and it's a serious legacy issue for those people that are coming up and inheriting this and starting with that big cleanup project.
Frankly, I think there's a lot more awareness now than there's ever been in the past. And I remember when I talked many years ago about going down to the LA River and seeing all the plastic bags caught in the branches of the trees. But I want you to know I don't see that anymore.
Right. And California did pass a plastic bag piece of legislation. It has reduced the number of bags going out of the stores, the takeout bags. And so that has helped. We now have heavier plastic bags, which is it a perfect solution? No, but we are reducing the number of bags, and they can be reused longer and longer. So people who are paying attention to that and dedicated to it can reuse those bags a number of times and bring them back to their store.
All right, let's try. Before we go to the dreaded Amazon box, this is the more traditional
Yes.
takeout plastics.
Right.
So here's a couple of them. Can these be recycled?
Unfortunately, this is one of the things that has crippled us over the last year. And this is one of the materials that the brokers and buyers and mills started rejecting early on. A couple of years ago, we had a truck that left in the morning, and it had baled mixed plastics. It was leaving the Burbank Recycle Center. It came back a few hours later.
Oh, the truck came back?
The truck came back, and I said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Well, the load was rejected." I said, "Why was the load rejected?" They said, "Because of clamshells." Now, this has exploded in the marketplace in the last 10, 15 years, where, we're getting salads, berries, produce, nuts, just everything imaginable, little cookies and, all sorts of things in clamshell materials. The ones that I have in my hand here, this bigger one is polystyrene, which usually you say polystyrene and people think of styrofoam.
Right.
But polystyrene is used all over. It's used in, say, electronics cases. It's used in all sorts of plastic things. And it's recyclable, but once you have salad dressing and shrimp tails and, just all the stuff that comes with food, nobody wants to take that degree of responsibility to clean that afterwards. And so the other thing about clamshells, even though they can be made out of a number of different materials, they're slightly different in their forming properties as a plastic. So there's just thousands of different ways you can create plastics, thousands and thousands of recipes. And each of them have their own characteristics. Some of them are easy to remanufacture, others are not. This seems to be one of those things that is just, it's giving people problems. So this has been a difficult market for us in the last couple of years.
So it's going in the black bin.
It's going in the trash, I'm afraid.
And its companion is going in the trash.
Yes, both of these, because they were food. Oh, but I'll point out here that, this one is polystyrene. This one is PET, which is the same plastic as our water bottles,
right,
which are completely recyclable. But this, it even says here, this bottle box, so it may have had bottles go into it that had been post-consumer recycled bottles, but now we don't have anyone that wants to buy it on the next stage. So this is a one-shot recycling program for this plastic, and then it's going to go into the garbage. In fact, I hate saying it, but we have actually sent loads of these to the landfill this year because we just don't have any buyers or any markets for it.
I want to show you the lowly wooden toothpick that comes to hold your big sandwiches together.
There it is. Okay, so wood is completely compostable. You could almost, poke this into your lawn, taking off the little plastic twizzle here on the end, and it would completely decompose, no problem at all. So if you want to take all your toothpicks and stick them into your lawn and just step on them, not with bare feet, but they would completely break down. And so these are compostable, but when you mix it with all these little plastics, now you've got all these microplastics in the composting mix. And when you talk to organic farmers, they don't want their fields glittering with, plastics and glass and things like that. So we need to keep those composting streams clean because it's absolutely going to come back in our food system.
The dreaded Amazon box.
Well,
Amazon has just been so hugely successful because they ship everywhere. I was on an island off of Alaska, and the plane we were flying on was half full of boxes from Amazon Prime. So tell our viewers all about cardboard.
Okay, so actually cardboard has a pretty steady market on the back end for us. When we go outside later today, I can show you the 3 bins that we have for cardboard at the recycle center at the drop-off area. We used to have 3 bins there for newspaper, and they have become cardboard. We no longer collect, the phone books or the newspaper separately because those have disappeared, basically. This has been rising every year over the last 10 years. I don't know when Amazon actually kicked off and went into gear, but the cardboard has risen tremendously. And, you know, oftentimes now things are packaged multiple times. Because first they go to warehouses, where, you know, big distribution centers. Then they're packaged in cardboard. Again, they probably came out of cardboard to begin with, you know, because they pack these things up on pallets and so on. So this is kind of a secondary or even a third level of packaging for that product. So by doing all these different distribution steps, we're increasing the amount of packaging that's going around those products that we get. Now, is this recyclable? Yes, cardboard's very recyclable. Even though the markets aren't great for it, and the markets aren't great for anything right now. So we can still recycle this, and we can still sell it. And so this is going to go into the recycling bin. And the best way to do it is just to, I found that if you push here, you can get your thumb under the tape and rip it like that.
Good. Oh, good.
And then just open it up. Do the same thing on the other side, push down, kind of loosen up the tape, rip it. And then you can flatten that, and then your recycling bin won't fill up, you know, from 2 cardboard boxes. And you can put that
It's
in.
one of Craig's hints
Handy
on how
hints.
to handy hints. All right, let's look at the ones that I think are the ones that trouble me the most. And I just came to ask you about these, because these came because we ordered some clothing, I think, online, and they came packaged in this. So can I drop those in the recycle bin?
No. We have never asked for plastic bags in the blue bins. And even though that might shock a lot of people because they assume that they are so recyclable, which they are, the reason we don't want plastic bags in our bins is because they tangle in equipment. Plastic bags, now here's the good stuff about plastic bags. They are recyclable. We can make new plastic bags out of these things. We are very happy to take them here at the Recycle Center. We're also very happy that retailers around Burbank can take these. So the Target stores, the grocers, there are a number of places where you can take plastic bags and just drop them off whenever you do your shopping. So that way you've got very convenient drop-off. Okay, so this is actually quite a success of recycling, honestly. Aluminum can be recycled thousands and thousands of times without wearing out. Yeah.
Really?
Paper might go around, you know, 7 times and you've basically lost the fiber because it keeps breaking, getting shorter. What you want in paper are long fibers, and when they get shorter, your paper becomes very weak, okay? A can like this is great. Aluminum has a very high scrap value. It's, you know, highly desired around the world to make all sorts of things out of it. And it's very simple to smelt and remake. And so you're saving tremendous amounts of energy by recycling this container. All aluminum, whether it's, you know, a piece of kitchenware or, you know, a pot or a pan or whatever it is. This is very recyclable. It doesn't wear out. Unlike plastics and, you know, these polymers, you might get 1 cycle out of them, maybe 2, maybe a couple more if you're lucky. This can go on for thousands of cycles.
Boy.
So we're going to put that in the recycling bin.
Okay, that's good
It's
news.
also redeemable because you got a deposit on it.
My pets
Okay.
and many Burbank pet owners do things like buy supplements for their food. And this comes in a plastic container.
Yeah.
It says made in the USA, which makes, I don't know whether that's the grizzly bear or the container.
Salmon oil, I don't know.
I don't know.
Right.
What about it? Does it go in the blue bin?
Yeah, this can go in the blue bin. If I can find the marking on this, this is, I'm assuming, oh, interesting. This is a #1 plastic, similar to a water bottle, but it has a pigment in it, so they've made it look white. We will pull this off the line, and just between, you know, you and I, this may be mistaken for another type of plastic because of its coloring. And it's not easy to tell in the line, and the workers do not have time to, you know, look at it with a magnifying glass. But this is recyclable. Again, we have, you know, one material, maybe a little minimal amount in the pump. There might be some different plastics in there. But the size of it, that it's big, that we can grab this with a human being rather than something tiny, which we'd have to pick with tweezers. We're never going to go after those things that are small. We're only going to collect big containers with handwork because labor is expensive to sort it out. Okay, so the bigger the container, the more likely we are to recycle it. The smaller, the less likely we are to recycle it.
Is there anything else that tells you about this container that makes it recyclable?
Not really. I mean, the size is a that brings up our percentage of winnings, and the fact that it is PET, polyethyl terephthalate, same as water bottles, is a good thing. So we're going to put this in the white bin.
Oh, okay. I feel much better.
Yeah.
So do my dogs.
Yeah. Okay.
Milk from our local market?
Yep. This is high-density polyethylene, and this is very recyclable. It has pretty steady markets, and because, again, it's a big container, leave the top on, that's okay, and put that in your blue bin. So that's a good one.
I have no idea what's in here.
Surprise package. Okay, let's see what we got.
got.
All right, looks like, we've got a little food. A little bit of leftovers from the meal. So this is a good one to talk about at-home composting, right? Maybe you've got some birds at home that like bread.
Viewers might recognize the good sourdough bread.
Ooh, all right, love sourdough. So this is a good one if you've got, bird feeder, put it in there. Maybe little squirrelies would like it. Paper, that gets a little oily if you have bread. Put that in your home compost. The bag, if it's clean, just throw it in the paper, in the blue bin. So, we've got 3 different categories here probably, or 2. We have the bread wrappers, the brown paper. This is actually high quality paper. Whenever you get a bag or cardboard, it has long fibers in the paper, and it's very strong. So we want this. We want the brown paper bags, and we want the cardboard in the blue bins.
Yeah. Where can people learn about composting? That's a really good point.
It's my favorite topic of all, and we do composting workshops here at the Recycle Center almost every month, and then sometimes we do them around the city as well. So if you go onto the Burbank Recycle Center website, it'll list the composting workshops that we have coming up. And we love people to compost at home, because actually you can divert anywhere, depending on the size of your family and the number of compost bins you have and how you handle things. You may divert anywhere from 7 to 1,500 pounds of organics every year, and that builds soil, holds water, releases nutrients, does all the good stuff that we need, especially in droughts and especially in low water years. So it's all benefits to get that back into the soil. Okay, so now we're going to talk about pharmaceuticals and needles, because it's shocking how many of these show up in the blue bins. In 1 year, we've had as many as 3,600 pounds of needles come into the recycle center.
That's almost 2 tons.
Almost 2 tons, yeah. And they come in every imaginable package possible. They come in plastic bags, they come in loose, they come in detergent bottles, things like this.
So this has...
Yeah, there's needles in there. The problem is that, at home there are no regulations about how these are handled. Even though we have safe guidelines, people don't know where to take them. So we get a lot of calls on needles and pharmaceuticals. Here in Burbank, we have 2 places during the weekends where people can drop off needles and pharmaceuticals. And those are the safe collection centers. One is in Sun Valley, one is on Colorado Boulevard, right by the I-5 and LA River. And those are open, from 9 to 3, Saturdays and Sundays. So you have about 100 days per year when you can drop off pharmaceuticals and needles. There's one pharmacy in Burbank that just announced they are going to take pharmaceuticals, not the needles, but the pharmaceuticals, and that's CVS on Hollywood Way. So we are starting to see some openings with our local businesses being great citizens and helping us out with these collections. And the danger for us are the worker exposures. We do not know where that needle's been, who has used it, and if they are stuck, there's a minimum of 6 months of blood testing where they don't know what is in their bloodstream.
6 months?
6 months, and that is if you're a healthy young individual. If you're up in years and maybe you have some compromises in immune strength, you may be tested 1.5 to 2 years. And you do not know whether, your family, is intimate with each. I mean, it's all these things that come up because of a needle stick. It is a major event here to have a worker stuck with needles. This is a daily watch that workers have to pay attention to, and we have, 25 workers with their hands all over this material on the sorting belts, on the big conveyors. And so all day long, they're just taking their hands like this and grabbing stuff. And they don't know if a needle is folded up into a piece of paper, if it's under a little something or other that they don't see. And so it's a continuous watch for them, and they need to be super careful about needles. There are no gloves that work. There's nothing that's impervious to a little hypodermic needle. It goes through all gloves.
So again, a lot of Burbankers call our offices asking where they can dispose of needles and pharmaceuticals, which I guess is what this is.
This is a combination here. Someone, filled up a container full of pills. Most of these are vitamins and supplements, but we don't know. We haven't actually sifted through this to see what else is in here. But this is the kind of stuff we definitely do not want in our bins.
So to go over this again, if I was recycling needles, where could I take them?
So first of all, get a container like this. We do have some at the Recycle Center. On weekdays, 8 to 5, you can come down and get a needle container. That container, however, we don't take it here. We don't do hazardous, we don't do biological hazards here. So it needs to go to the safe collection centers on the weekends, Saturdays or Sundays, 9 to 3.
Before we head away from here, I wondered if you could also talk a little bit about the Master Recycling Program, because that is different than the composting program, is it not?
Yeah.
And let me know any other programs, and our residents know of any other programs that might be useful for them to contact the recycling center over.
Yeah. Our Master Recycling Program has been evolving over the last 4 or 5 years, and so I think we've put 70 or 80 people through it. It's a 7-class program. We go to reuse centers. We talk about pieces of legislation around recycling, why we accept certain materials, why we don't, some of the things that we've talked about here today. We talk about durability standards. We talk about reuse programs, how buildings can be carefully deconstructed and reused as opposed to demolished. We go to companies that recycle movie sets, that recycle things for theaters. Habitat for Humanity has restores that, people can drop things off and actually, get tax breaks for donating things that people can then use. Whenever people call us up and they're moving out of town or they're cleaning out a house or something like that, we always bring up the donation parts of this, because everybody has a little bit of something around their house that, someone else can use. We do film showings, we bring in speakers, we do workshops. The past couple of years, we've been working on food waste and trying to emphasize that, because the state of California wants to get all the things out of the landfill that generate methane. And this has been a huge focus for us. And so eventually, the city will be looking at how we collect foods, food scraps, especially from the commercial districts and the high-density, multifamily areas. Some of that will be done with private contractors. Some of that may be done with the city. So we're looking at that now, and we've even talked about creating a composting facility at some point in the city. What we're going to do next is we're going to look at the drop-off area and where people can drop off all the materials that can be recycled.
So this is members of our public just driving into the recycling center and bringing whatever they have that they want to recycle.
Right. Not only people who live in Burbank, but some of the businesses, and even some people from surrounding communities can drop things off here too. So a little bit of everybody, yeah.
Okay, let's go do it.
All right.
And our first bin?
Well, we have 3 bins at the first part of the row, and these are all for cardboard. And just as we talked about before, we've got online shopping boxes. So all day long, this is filling up and being emptied, and every few hours they empty each of these bins. So we get a lot of cardboard here. And anybody can come in Monday through Saturday, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 on Saturday, drop things off here.
You are closed on Sunday.
We are closed on Sunday.
This says no cardboard.
Yeah. So this bin is set up for mixed paper. We don't have cardboard in this because we like to keep those two things separate. This is just mixed paper, which will be everything from shopping guides and mail to office paper, all those kinds of things. So mixed paper is what it says, mixed paper. We don't want plastic laminated papers or bubble pack, if you have the envelopes with a bubble pack. We just want pure paper.
What about magazines
Yeah.
and catalogs that are still mailed to houses?
Yeah, magazines and catalogs are sometimes coated paper, and so they have a shiny finish, but that's not a problem. We recycle those just with other paper that's not shiny or coated.
Okay, so your message to Burbankers is go ahead, put those magazines and put those catalogs into and bring them here to the recycling center.
Yep, magazines and catalogs are great, and then the only thing that we probably wouldn't put in here are hardcover books or things that are laminated, like the menus at restaurants, that kind of thing.
The plastic bottles.
Yeah, so this bin is full of California redemption value bottles. This is for people that don't care about redeeming them for cash. They can just drop them off quick and drive away. This is a water bottle. I always want to encourage people to use a reusable cup because we can reduce the billions of these that are used by using things like this, okay? Over here we've got mixed plastics. We actually just lost our, the plastic bag bin just went to get emptied. So we see plastic bags in here. We actually don't want to mix the film plastic, which is the bags, with the other plastics. You can also see, we talked about some of the clamshells that we have in here. We haven't announced that to the public because we're hoping the markets will open up on the back end, and if we keep changing our list, it's just too confusing for the public. So we still accept those here. We're still getting them in the blue bins. We're working on the markets. So what we have here is a bin just for aluminum cans, and although we have a lot of beverage containers in here with California redemption value on them, this is generally designated for non-redemption value cans that are aluminum.
Okay, and then how about this one here? This is a little different.
The crew has been very good in emptying the bins today, and this one is generally for scrap metals. We get everything from swing sets to, pop-up canopy frames to, aluminum doors, just all sorts of scrap metal things that show up around households and businesses. And anybody can drop things in here. We take these scrap metals and we just put them in a huge roll-off, and those go off to a scrap metal place that then separates them into different categories.
So do you see in here somebody put a toaster in? I am just amazed.
Yeah, generally that toaster should go into our electronics because it does have probably some soldered connections in it. It's ended up in our scrap metal, which isn't the worst thing on earth, but generally that would go into the electronics.
All right, are there any other bins to look at, or shall we walk down the line?
Yeah, out here we just have 3 glass bins over here. We have one for clear glass, one for brown, and one for green. And one of the things I always like to point out is that our green glass that looks kind of gold colored, it's sort of an olive colored glass, is actually recycled glass that comes from 3 colors that have broken and mixed together, and then they've been made into new, generally wine bottles. Yeah, so those bottles, you can almost be assured have been recycled.
That is so interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the other thing about wine bottles is that there's no deposit on them. And the state has this funny tipping point. If you have 7.4% alcohol in your beverage or greater, you have no deposit. If you have under 7.4%, 7.3, 7.4, you do have a deposit. So beer is in, wine and champagne are out.
I have absolutely no idea how that got done. Do you?
Yes, better lobbyists.
There's this huge pile of stuff behind us. Right. Does this come from Burbank every year, every day?
Well, that part of that pile is from Burbank. We generate about 35 tons per day on our curbside collections, and we have 15 or 16 trucks running around the city each day of the week. And then we also bring materials in from other cities and from other recyclers that collect materials outside of Burbank. And so in total, we generally have about 100 to 140 tons a day of total material that comes in here. So, on an annual basis, we're up over 20,000 tons a year. And I'll give you a chance to look at some of that. And then where we're standing right now is where we collect some of what we call universal waste. These are electronics primarily, the waste that you'd find in just about every household. We get computers, televisions, sewing machines, microwave ovens, all the small electronic devices and appliances. If it has a battery or a cord, chances are we will put it into our electronics collection. We open this only to Burbank residents and businesses, and what we collect are what we call household quantities. Those are generally, we say, about 100 pounds per year. In sum total, every year we collect 600 to 650,000 pounds of electronics, batteries, fluorescents, and all those waste electronics. So this is a really great example of things that become obsolete, things that aren't made very well, they're not durable, they're not upgradable or repairable, and we just see this churning of products that we would like to see a much better job done with, in terms of using the cases, the power packs, the cords, whatever can be reused, we'd like to see that. And eventually we hope to get there.
You mentioned batteries, so I want to ask you for a moment, what about batteries? Because so much of our environment is going towards using batteries,
right.
Battery packs, rechargeable batteries, and what happens to batteries after they've reached their useful life?
Yeah. Not only are we seeing an exponential growth in batteries, but we're seeing an exponential growth in the type of batteries that are being developed. We're seeing all sorts of different constellations, sizes and charges and voltages and different packagings that we've never seen before. In the last few years, we've had, dozens of batteries that literally didn't exist just a few years ago. And so our crew here is constantly, looking at new styles and what to do with them. And honestly, lithium-ion batteries are a real problem for us because they do short out. They do kind of puff up and expand. And at that point, we don't know if they've already shorted or they're about to. And we have tons of material here that can burn. And when those batteries start heating up, we've got real problems. So we have to be really careful with our batteries. It's one of those things that we never want in the trucks. We do not want them in the blue bins. We want to collect them here and keep them safe and, watch anything that looks suspicious. We package those carefully in fireproof containers.
Well, let's take a walk up the line and see what the whole operation really looks like. Well, we're standing at an enormous pile of material that's submitted, put in for recycling, and then behind us is this gigantic conveyor belt.
Right.
What are we looking at?
Well, over on the floor here, we're probably looking at about 60 to 80 tons of loose material that's all mixed up. It's come from curbside collections and from businesses. That gets pushed. We use a huge front end loader to push that into a pit. The pit goes into a conveyor, and that conveyor, I call it the trashcalator because it goes up off the floor. It's kind of behind us here. And that's the trashcalator. It goes up to sorting belts that the workers are working on, and every hour they sort through somewhere around 15 to 17 tons of material. So in an 8-hour shift, they can do, about 120 tons, something like that. And when we get up a little higher, we can see what that tonnage actually looks like. On our left side over here, we have barrels that are set up to collect all of the crazy things that we get that we've never asked for. And we've made a lot of promises about recycling, but we have a lot of dangers with recycling as well. And people really need to pay attention what they put in those carts, because we get batteries, spray paints, a lot of solvents, gas cylinders, lead acid batteries that spill. We get insecticides that blow open. We had to close down just a few weeks ago because of bear mace, a huge can of it about the size of a hairspray can. It blew up in the faces of workers. We had to send some to emergency. We had 3 different hazmat crews out here to try to figure out what it was because we couldn't identify it. We had to shut the line down for hours and close this place down and evacuate it because we didn't know how serious it was. We have explosives, we've had the bomb squad out here, we have ammunition, flares, fireworks, all sorts of things that people just wouldn't expect in a recycle center that's supposed to be saving the earth, right? So we need to be extremely careful and let everyone know that only those things that we ask for should be put in those bins.
Oh my gosh, I never realized that those kinds of things would end up here at the recycling center.
Yeah, there's a lot of safety issues involved with running a recycling center. I've been here for 16 years, I think, and there's not a day that goes by when I'm not shocked at how much we generate. As you know, as a nation, we have about 5% of world population, but you hear these numbers where we're generating about 30% of the waste in the world out of a 5% population. So we are way ahead of the curve and we have overshot so many needs. We live in a world of wants, and this is one of the places where it really plays out. So if you look at this pile, you can see that the major component in it is cardboard. It might be because these are commercial loads, which has a tendency to show more cardboard. But the cardboard has been rising over the last number of years because of online shopping. So this is a typical mix of what we go through. And as it comes up the line here, it goes by our sorting line. And then I'll show you some of the things as we walk up here, how this is done by hand.
Well, I know nobody's working right now.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you a couple questions about how long they work before they take a break, because this doesn't feel air conditioned at all.
No.
Or maybe there's cool air blowing on workers, but still, it has to be a pretty tough job.
We monitor the temperatures out here extremely closely. We've had temperatures on this sorting line of 115 degrees, but we also add an index of workers, activity, plus all of the protective equipment that they wear. So they have dust masks, ear protectors, hard hats. Oftentimes they're wearing something around their head to protect them from dust. They have aprons, gloves, steel-toed shoes. And so when the temperatures rise, we change the shifts, start earlier in the morning. We break them every hour almost for water and just cool down. And so today, because it's so hot, they've ended earlier. They started earlier and ended earlier today than normal. Without the workers, we would have no recycling program. And they work extremely hard. It is like swimming a marathon every day with the number of arm strokes that they move with. And they're in some of the dustiest, hottest, or cold conditions that we can imagine in Southern California. So yeah, they need a lot of credit and a lot of kudos and a lot of thanks.
Oh, I think we're all happy to acknowledge them for their work. Yes. Why don't we go up to their sorting level and see exactly kind of how they function when they're here?
We do both positive and negative sorting, meaning we take the things off the line that we can't recycle and we put that into trash. We take the things off the recycling line that we can recycle and we bale those up and ship them out to brokers and recyclers. So this bin down below us has all the film plastic. Remember, we don't put that on our accepted list, and yet we get tons of this stuff every year. And so nothing is perfectly sorted here. It won't look pristine like, it's perfectly sorted. These workers are working very quickly to get through 15 to 17 tons an hour. And when they're pulling things off of the line, a lot of things tangle and they pull off together. They drop them in the bins. These big bunkers are about the size of a single car garage. And they have a walking floor in the bottom. So when they fill up, we open up a big, Star Wars door. and the floor walks the material out onto a conveyor belt that then takes it to a baler and smashes it into a bale. And we'll see that in just a minute. And then finally down here, I want to show you how this screen looks that tangles up with plastic bags. Because this is the contraption that separates paper from bottles and cans and things like that. And this is what tangles up. All of these rubber stars, they're almost like starfish the size of dinner plates.
Right.
And those are spinning, but the plastic bags just tangle in between them and then start rubbing together, and we have to get those out of there. Otherwise, things don't fall through the screen. And again, we could get friction and fires. So we have to keep this thing cleaned.
Some of these locations have tubs in them, and it looks like, at least in this one here, there's oversized wood that's come up. So when the workers are grabbing things, are they looking for these kinds of things as well? And is this tub, representative of what we see piled up here at the end of the day?
Yes, they use big garbage cans and other containers. We do have some big gondolas here that we put rocks, big metal pieces, wood, things like that. Again, it's not the stuff that we actually want in our program, but we get it, and so we have to deal with it. And this is, these are some of the things that just take a lot of labor and time to sort through. We'd much rather have this done upstream than downstream here. Behind us over here, I'll point out that we have big cages that we blow jugs and bottles and cans into. We have 4 of these along the sorting line. They have big bomb bay doors on the bottom, so when we have them filled to a certain level, the people who operate all the machinery, they know that when they've hit a certain level, they've got about a bale. And so they open it up, let those things drop down to the conveyor belt that then carries them to a baler, smashes them into a bale. Then it goes into the loading area where we store it, and then when we get a truck in here, we load the truck up and take it away.
That's amazing.
This line here is where we finish hand sorting the paper as it goes through. We actually have a cardboard return that is just over here. We walked over it, and that brings it back to the big bunker over there that collects cardboard. So there are some loops in this system where materials are moving both forwards and backwards. And so this is kind of hand finishing of paper. We want to get the plastics out, we want to get the cardboard out, and then the paper moves on and it goes over here to a big baler, and you can see where the bale is popping out over there. And those are some of the heaviest, biggest bales that we have. Those are probably in the 1,500 to 1,800 ton range.
So by the time we get up here, all the basic sorting has been done, including removing things that can't possibly be recycled.
Well, this is actually the first, I'll call this the first third of how we sort.
Okay.
We're getting we're probably getting about 80 to 90% of the paper off right here. But the other parts of paper are the tiny little pieces that fall through that screen and keep going down the line. So we can follow the line down a little bit further and see how we finish that off and what shows up in the back.
And we definitely should look at what it looks like when it's all baled up and ready to go out.
Absolutely. So in this section of the sorting line, we have workers picking off the containers, mostly liquid containers. These are jugs that might have laundry detergent, beverages, any sort of liquid, around the house, things for, cleaners or whatever. And they have different categories here. We do aluminum. This is colored HDPE. We have PET over there, and then we have HDPE milk jugs and the natural color. So we separate by color and by polymer, different types of plastic and metals.
And that separation is because that's what the market demands. I mean, the recyclers are actually specializing in different kinds of stuff.
Yes, absolutely. It goes to all sorts of different industries, so they all want something different and different grades and that kind of thing. Some of them can handle the colored plastics, and they might sort those further downstream into separate colors, so you have yellow, red, blue, whatever it might be. And others just want the natural colored plastics, so they can go back, and if they want to use colorants on them, they can, that kind of thing. So this section is primarily for containers, and that's primarily what we're pulling off. But when they do find other materials, they still use trash cans and containers just to get those things that they don't have a chute for here. And then we have runners, almost like you'd have in a restaurant, and they're running them up and down the line to drop them in the proper chute. This big contraption here is for cans, steel cans, and it's a magnet. It's a big plate magnet with a belt that runs around the outside of it. So when a can goes under that magnet, it is popped up. It's held against the belt by the magnet, and the belt moves it over to the side, and it drops in a chute, and then it goes off to a bunker. So we don't even have to touch those by hand. It's really great. You may want to just get some shots here of how this place kind of looks. It's sort of the Rube Goldberg of contraptions.
It does look like a Rube Goldberg contraption, given the bins and the conveyor belts and the magnets and how things get filled up and drop down. And then over your shoulder, what the final bales look like.
So over here is where the Lost Ark is buried from, the old Indiana Jones movies. But over here we have our plastics, our metals, our paper, our cardboard. All of those are baled up, and we put them into rows, and then when we have a truck come in, that load goes back out through the loading docks. We load up the container. Oftentimes that container goes to Long Beach, gets on a ship, and then it's taken across the Pacific to one of the Pacific Rim countries, where it's then unloaded, brought to mills, and separated, cleaned, chipped, whatever the process might be. And from there it goes to the manufacturers. So it goes through a number of steps, and it's kind of funny because we sometimes think that if we recycle something, we've saved a lot of, what should we say, resources, right? But in fact, recycling it has a backside as well, which is that we enable a lot of consumption by saying it's recyclable. So we have to be really cautious not to use recycling as that first tier of defense against overconsumption. It's a real moral tale is what it is.
Well, that's where you go back to your 3 R's, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Last. Yeah. What we really need is a durability star, just like we have Energy Star. So if something lasts a quarter of a century and you can repair it, upgrade it, things like that, you get a durability star. And I think that would be a great thing for all of us to think about, because every time we throw something away, we think that, oh, we're saving water or something.
We really do. We think that we're so good.
Yeah.
And we are, actually.
Well, it's not bad. It's not, but we're using it out of proportion in terms of how well it works in creating environmental performance. And we do need to be much more sophisticated about that conversation.
Let's walk through this little canyon here.
Yeah.
Tell me, what are we looking at?
Well, over on this side, we've got bales coming out of the baler, and we use that baler behind us for just about everything, for metals, plastics, and cardboard. On our left, we actually bale up the things that we're going to landfill, and this looks like loads of landfill material. It has wet, sloppy stuff in it. It's kind of a mixture of low-grade materials. Some of it is recyclable, but we just can't spend the time and labor to sort everything perfectly. So when things end up in this category, they go directly to the landfill, and that's the last time we touch it. Every time we put a ton of material through this recycle center, we pay $121 to have it sorted. And a lot of these commodities are only worth $10 to $30 a ton. So we just can't handle it over and over again to, go into the fine detail of recycling.
I think a really important point that you make is that for the recycling center to be successful, it really has to deal in volume. So as much as we'd like all the little things to be caught and recycled, it's not possible unless a resident actually brings the things down here and deposits them in the right bin that we saw.
Right. If people can bring things to the recycle center, we don't have to sort it at all. We just bail that directly, and so that saves us a tremendous amount of time and resources. But the opposite is also true. If people throw things in the bins that they're not sure about, we not only spend the money to sort everything out, we also spend the money to then landfill it. So that's the most expensive material that we can handle, is the stuff that we first sort and then throw away. And those numbers have been rising over this last year.
You said that there's more stuff going to the landfill. What do you think that we can do in our city and the council to educate the public about trying to reduce, reuse, and recycle?
Yeah. Well, there's really like three approaches to this. One is public education, which is very complicated actually because of the mix of materials that come through from the manufacturers and retailers. So we do the best we can with the resources that we have to educate the public. Secondly, we really need to create policies about materials, and we can't just accept the marketplace as it is, growing with disposables. This just isn't going to pan out. We don't have a, if our end goal is just to create more garbage that's non-recyclable, we've succeeded. What we really want to do is create a better world, a livable world, a clean city, and clean communities, water, air, soil, all of it. And so that really means making choices. We don't want to just, be sitting still with first world problems. We want to really show the example and do a great job of using resources carefully and in a meaningful way. So,
well, let's look at the other bales.
So over here we have cardboard, and each of these bales are probably around 1,200 to 1,400 pounds, something like that. Our mixed paper over here, this usually weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 1,800 pounds. And then over on this side, we've got a mixture of things, first starting with non-recyclables that will be landfilled. Secondly, we have mixed plastics. Third, we have film plastics, plastic bags, that sort of thing. Then we have high-density polyethylene that's colored. Next, we have PET, number 1 plastic, which are water and soda bottles. Our aluminum cans come next. Then it looks like more mixed plastics or film plastics. These might, I don't know if we've got a market for these now or not. And then natural colored HDPE, which are the big jugs. And then we've got some repetition of, we got some tin cans, and then it looks like we've got some other landfillable materials, which right now we've got a whole lot of it. And then the back of this truck is full of cardboard. That's how we pack it in. It gets shipped around the world, generally in about 20-ton loads, and that's how it's brokered around the world.
This is your loading dock, so when we're done with everything, the packaged and bundled and put together stuff comes here and then it goes out. Exactly.
So this truck will drive directly to one of the docks around Long Beach or San Pedro. The brokers basically rent spaces on ships, and they fill that space up with all the things that they have made arrangements for, and then that ships to a port, and from there it's distributed.
Well, thank you so much for taking us on this ultimate detailed look at our recycling center here in Burbank and letting our Burbankers know exactly the best way to recycle. You really are a terrific credit to our city, and I'm so glad that you were able to give us this tour today.
Well, I'm really happy you came, and I know this is a very complicated topic, but we're always happy to let people know how this works and how to do a better job. So thank you for coming.
All right, well, that's another Mayor's Show, welcoming you to one of the gems in our city of Burbank.